Why is it so important? Of course, because it seriously increases risk, not just for cardiovascular disease, but all the other complications I just mentioned. This is that one, the one study I said where 47 million Americans have these metabolic syndrome characteristics. I think it's higher, really, but this is the official statistic, so let's just stick with the official statistic, as if 47 million people wasn't enough. Metabolic syndrome in children. I remember I said you got to see. Our practice probably has maybe as many kids as adults. I mean, we have a lot of children in our practice, either for spectrum disorders, weight management. 13-year-old girls with fibromyalgia, the middle-aged woman's disease at age 13. Think of this: 171 overweight, obese children, 30% had high insulin, markers associated with hyperinsulinemia. This is the study I just quoted earlier. Higher BMI, total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, higher triglycerides, higher C-reactive protein, higher insulin to glucose ratio, higher glucose levels, and lower HDLs. That's the Kid Power study in March of 2004. Think about that combination. What does that mean? What's really bad is that HDL going low, right? Because if your HDLs are low, you're actually 4 times at risk to develop heart disease versus even having a high LDL. Right? It's that HDL mark that everybody's shooting for now. That's kind of one of the real golden targets in modern pharmacologic therapy, right? Pfizer Pharmaceuticals is coming out with a drug that's targeted at HDLs. And we know ways that raise HDLs, right? Exercise, fish oils, both of them will raise HDLs. So, once again, what are we going to do with the pancreas? Well, we hear everything from, no, it's the 40-30-30 diet. No, it's not the 40-30-30 diet. It's the Ornish diet. No, it's not the Ornish diet. It's the Atkins diet. It's not the Atkins diet. It's the Hampton's diet. It's not the Hampton's diet. It's the Paleolithic diet. No, it's not that. It's the Rosedale diet. There is the short, you name it, man. Ice cream and tuna fish diet. There's all these diets, right? We got diets. You know what? I would invite you all to just really, let's quit trying to, everybody's trying to take credit for a diet. When I wrote the Metabolic Code book, it was like, all I did was say, here is a good, healthy way to eat nutrition. We didn't say, here's a Metabolic Code diet plan. Because you know what? When you look at the data, it is overwhelming when you see that for the majority of people, if they would follow a Mediterranean diet, I'm going to eat a lot of fresh vegetables. I'm going to be modest in my grain intake. I'm going to have fruit, but I'm not going to have nearly as much fruit as vegetables. I'm going to choose lean proteins. I'm going to be modest with my dairy intake, and my refined sugar intake's way up top. I think the statistic, Laura, we put this slide here. Is it 83% or 87% less likely to develop all-risk mortality? 87% reduction in all-risk mortality. That's my wife back there, by the way. Dietitian. Enlightened dietitian. 87% risk reduction, and that was a 288 person study. That was a nurse's study that was studied over 14 years, actually, where they looked at that. But nobody's eating that way. We're going to put people on all these magic diets. Bottom line is, you got a sliding scale of, like I said, of grain tolerance. We may start some people on 0 grains in order to rehabilitate their insulin receptors, but we want to get them back to eating some grains, because you know what? Grains aren't the bad guys. But they're also not to be overeaten, right? A half a loaf of bread with dinner, and by the way, I had donuts, and after the donuts, that pizza's looking pretty fine. You can't do that either. So it's important to realize that, and realize people are craving carbohydrates because of low serotonin. People are under chronic stress. Under chronic stress, I uncouple my serotonin manufacturing, and when my serotonin goes low, carbs are my friend. I want to eat carbs. You can't tell me, and people will tell you it's willpower. It's willpower. I'm so guilty. I'm not worth anything because I can't stay away from them. No, it's not that. Your serotonin's low, your body will find a way for you to crave carbs, and you'll either mow through a bag of chips or mow through a bag of cookies or hit a half of apple pie, or you'll crank on, the little jelly beans that your kid just brought home from school. And, the kid's crying, bitten your stress up, but you don't care because the beans feel good. Yeah, that's because there's some philodendron and magnolia in the beans. You're getting your cortisol to come down. So, the thing is that, well, let's go to that metabolic dysregulator then. Let's get serotonin to come up so the cravings can come down. As I balance serotonin and drop cortisol, I then am going to get my thyroid working better. My pancreas then starts to begin to function more appropriately with glucose load. Now it starts to make sense. That's how nutrition starts to work for people. When we step back and look at their metabolism and go, how does this integrate? What's the critical path of this person? Cortisol is of course, cortisol is everything right now. It's the cause du jour for 2005 and probably 6. And that's until we figure out that cortisol is just a messenger, guys. Cortisol is there for a reason. I want cortisol. Believe me, if for some reason a crisis hits, I want to be able to crank the cortisol up. I do not want to be depleted of cortisol. I want to be able to lift the car off a loved one if you have to. I want to be able to run from the guy who's trying to rob me. Well, I probably wouldn't do that. Probably want to hit him, but depends how big the gun was. No. But no shortage on cortisol here. I can't figure that out because, I've only had 5 espressos. So which, by the way, when people test for their cortisol, we talk about when you do a blood test, you do a salivary test. Man, I'll tell you, I've heard every which way about it. And to me, we've done both. If a person's got insurance and they don't want to pay for a salivary cortisol, we'll pull a morning cortisol on you out of your serum and see what it is. However, I do believe that cortisol is a lipid chemical. It's a lipid hormone, and that it's going to be picked up better in the saliva. So if I have my druthers, I like saliva, but we'll do blood too. But bottom line is that we got to change it, because most people are walking around in a heightened stress awareness state, or they've already burned out their heightened stress awareness state, and they don't have any cortisol left. Flattened out. I'm fatigued all day. I feel like somebody unplugged me from the wall. Right? Now, talking about this whole thing of insulin resistance and cortisol in the pancreas. What are we told to eat for breakfast? What's the breakfast of champions? Wheaties is the breakfast of champions. Or, if you're from Canada, Tim Hortons Danish and a coffee. A double. When's your cortisol highest? Your cortisol is highest in the morning, and then it goes like this. Now, why am I going to feed myself lots of carbohydrates and caffeine in the morning? Of course, caffeine causes the stimulation of cortisol to be released 18 hours after the ingestion of it, and that's why I'm always happy. But if you get by that, figure this out physiologically. If my cortisol is at its peak here, and I take coffee and donuts here, what am I doing? I'm driving my cortisol up, my glucose load up, and my insulin resistance is up at its peak when cortisol is high. Never put carbohydrates in your body in the morning. It's actually better to put them in your body at night when your body's asking for serotonin because your brain's so burned out that it can't make any. That's why you crave carbohydrates at night. So eat some complex carbs at night so you make some serotonin. It is so important to understand the circadian rhythm of your physiology. Why are you going to eat sugar when your cortisol's high? Why are you going to load carbs? What do people do for years? Everybody, breakfast of champions. I'm going to have 3 pieces of toast, a bowl of oatmeal, 3 bananas on top of the oatmeal, right? And then a breakfast bar on the way in, right? 3 scoops of sugar in my coffee. What happens an hour and a half later? Crash. What happens when you crash? You're dysglycemic. Bottom line, you're dysglycemic. I can't tell you, just by switching people. I take people and I say, you know what? I want you to take all protein in the morning. Drink an almond milk protein shake in the morning of whatever protein you don't have an antigenic issue with. So whether it's almond or it's whey or it's egg, whatever you want to do. I'm not a big soy fan personally. Do that in the morning with some flaxseed meal. Get some fiber in you, low protein, let it move through you, and guess what? I would say that 9 out of 10 people say, wow, I feel good all the way to noon. And gee, I'm starting to lose weight. Well, why? Once you induce insulin resistance in the morning, do you think it stops in the afternoon? Like, oh, that's when the insulin resistance stops, right there. No, it does not stop. Once you start the signaling process, you're training your body. It has metabolic memory. So every day, like a good little puppet, your body's chemistry is becoming a metabolic syndrome, insulin-resistant driven chemistry. And this is just physiology. Actually, the Naval Academy discovered all this stuff. They did all the research. It's not, it's published stuff. Nobody's reading it.